Hi. I called this episode, I don't know why I worry about my hair. I call this episode Stigma 3 because I'm pretty sure this is the third episode that we mentioned stigma at all. And then I forget what the other subtitle is, but we'll get there. Okay, so still in Facing Bipolar by Fetterman and Thompson. So these are their comments about stigma, but we have had others, including from my dissertation. It's one thing to get sick or injured. Just think of the sore throats or slight illnesses you've had in the past. With these occurrences, you feel a little bit bummed, but you also recognize that these are just the passing realities of being human. The same doesn't apply to mental illness. Certainly, there are times when you come up against limitations in brain power. You may wish you could read faster and remember more, calculate better, or be a whiz at a foreign language. While you may want to be smarter, generally you do just fine. Even when you feel intellectually challenged, most of the time you don't feel like something's wrong with you, and you don't assume that you'll be vulnerable to mental illness. That's something that happens to other people, not you. Bipolar disorder expresses itself with as much variability as the people who have it. We've said that before. All the bipolar individuals have separate stories. The many faces of bipolar disorder also have many different phases. You might recognize that years before you ever had your first manic episode. There were times when you felt like you were on a moderate sized emotional roller coaster. No one diagnosed you as being sick, but it wouldn't have surprised you to be told that you were moody or to hear a comment like, "You're always so intense." Defensiveness in reaction to feedback, a common reaction. When you hear something like, "You're always so intense," you may interpret it as some sort of negative judgment. It would even seem that these kind of comments or perceptions, when translated into straight talk, really mean you're difficult to deal with, or sometimes you can be a pain in the ass. That just isn't the same as someone saying you seem to have a cold, or "I see you sprain your ankle." The most common reaction when you feel criticized is to put up a defensive wall in an attempt to protect yourself from feeling hurt. The wall doesn't always work. Comments about your moodiness usually do hurt, but the wall also gets in the way of objectively considering the reality of what someone else might be saying. When you hear others say you're moody, you're difficult to deal with, or other variations on this theme, how often do you stop and think to yourself, am I really difficult? Am I different from my friends? Could my moodiness be abnormal? Well, unless you've been diagnosed for quite a while, you're familiar with the different warning signs and letting you know you're entering a period of instability. Comments from others often don't shed any light. And then another important factor gets in the way of acknowledging something's wrong. To objectively assess your feelings requires some mental juggling. It requires you to interpret your immersion in your experience and take a step out to look inward. This is easier said than done, especially when are strong outside of the anger and reflect upon it, where it comes from, whether or not it's justified, whether it's out of proportion with the situation. It's much easier to do this after you've calmed down. Being successful with these mental gymnastics in the middle of intense emotion can be difficult. That's true for everyone. not just for those who are bipolar. Okay, so I was watching, I started watching another one of Oprah and Arthur Brooks. He's a professor at Harvard, and they wrote a book about being happier. Now, I forget how they say it, but anyhow, beyond happy. Okay. So they mention a gratitude journal. I may say things in my journal that are gratitude. A lot of times I say things in my journal that upset me, but I don't want to say to the people that have upset me. So maybe I should add an extra page every day for gratitude. Then something else besides a gratitude journal. There were two different kinds of journals. And this man is a professor at Harvard in the business school. And his favorite subject is teaching the students how to be happier. So I'm trying to think of one thing I got out of that, and I'm starting to watch it again with he and Oprah. He writes in the Atlantic, Oprah said, take all your columns and put them together and make a book. And then I think she and he collaborated, so they're both authors of this book. I know what I want to say. You cannot be happy always. In life, you're going to be unhappy. You're going to have pain. You're going to have joy. You're going to have all of those things. And to have all of those things actually works to be a human person. And I think they were talking, maybe not them, but in another thing. Like, if you had all the money you wanted, and you had the house you wanted, and you had a boat, and I say this oftentimes about Hollywood people. Like, are they happy once they've attained all of that? And if you know anybody in Hollywood that's committed suicide, I could name like 5 off the top of my head. It seems like it just doesn't make them happy to have wealth, acclaim, fame. There's something more. Their relations with friends, their relations with family, their relations with a partner or a spouse. But that wasn't all in the, I'm not sure that was all in the book, but a good chunk of that was in the book. And the chunk of, you make a goal. And when you get to that goal, you think you're going to be happy. But their instructions, and Dr. Jordan Peterson and somebody else, is when you get a goal, make another goal and make it a challenging goal, not just, a goal that's easily attainable. So you're on a journey to fulfill your goals. And they also mentioned, and it was mentioned in another podcast that I watched, when you compliment others, when you help others, when you stretch yourself to do things for others, it can help what is lacking in you at that moment. If you're sad, if you're depressed, you don't have to be bipolar. These are suggestions for everybody. Pardon me. You're not seeing me do this. I didn't have them for like a day. And water chaser. Okay. And my one cat wants to be here. Okay, back to where we are. Not wanting to accept your bipolar reality. I know many people, when they're diagnosed, like, they wish those words weren't said. They wish those words weren't true. But when you get to a place that can help you remain stable for long periods of time, try to be baseline with everybody. It doesn't have to be the tragedy people feel when they're first diagnosed. So, not wanting to accept your bipolar reality. When we return to Ashley, remember Ashley's story was very sad, experienced during her college application process, we see that she knew something was happening that she really didn't want to accept. If she had been honest with herself or her psychiatrist, she probably would have said something like, I feel a feeling that something's wrong, but I don't want to admit it. And the reason she didn't want to admit it is painfully clear. She didn't want to be bipolar. She didn't want to have to take medication. She didn't want to accept the effect of medication on her creativity. She didn't want to face the impact her disorder and medication might have on her future. She didn't want to be different from other people. She desperately wanted to be able to return to her old self, and she couldn't find her way back. What would you want? Who would want any of that? Ashley, not you, not anyone. There are parts of being bipolar you can't accept because you're immersed in it and you can't see it. There are parts of being bipolar that you didn't want to accept because doing so feels like you're different, broken, and defective. Broken. Feel like you're broken. And there are parts of being bipolar that are difficult to accept because the long-term implications are hard to make peace with. Ashley's second time headed toward instability was a painful reminder of the first. What if it were her third or fifth or ninth? There's a point where the onset of symptoms becomes a painful reminder of the dreaded part of life, a familiar but unwelcome visitor, until you reach the point where you can truly accept the disorder without feeling overwhelmed by the fear and anger and loss. All you want to do is run from it. These feelings are normal and understandable. They're even predictable. Most people with bipolar disorder struggle with such feelings during the early stages of the journey. Okay, I'm going to make it shorter today, but the next part of this book is called Vulnerability, an Unfamiliar Aspect of the Emerging Self. And we have a Jason coming up. We have a checklist coming up. We have Marcy's story, writing your own story. Yeah, it's like 20 pages. We'll never cover that in 1, 2, divide 20 by 5. Four episodes. I predict 4 episodes about this topic from this book, and it's helpful. Like all that we've talked about kind of comes together. The acceptance, the medication, the talk therapy, CBT. And how do we know, unless they're going to tell us about it, that when Ashley gets on the right path for her illness, that her passion and her success as a painter won't come back? Because that is oftentimes the answer to the challenges. So, have a wonderful Sunday. I wish I could stay up for the Oscars because my oldest sister is an actress, and it's nights like this that we can share detailed information. But I never make it to the end because in the beginning they do supporting actor, supporting actress, then they go through a lot. Then at the end, actor, actress, writer, producer, director, movie. I'll never make it till then, but as my sister says, you can see clips the next morning. So if you're somebody that watches entertainment award shows or fashion. Enjoy tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.